Hello, Suzanne. Welcome. Thanks for talking to me. What was Sydney like in the 1950s? What are your memories?
William, I came to Sydney in 1953. I was 21 years old and had come from New Zealand. We had just missed out on the Royal Tour in 1952 because King George VI died. And so I arrived in Sydney where everyone was disappointed. It was reasonably still post-war. I was of a generation of girls who left school wearing 3 box-pleat gym tunics, moving straight into Dior's new look. Beautiful svelte figures, lovely long skirts. So by the time I came to Sydney, all the girls had moved into that. So Sydney was a city full of pretty girls in pretty dresses. It was a lovely town. Not as busy, obviously, as it is now. Street photographers in all the streets, where you had your photograph taken, would go then to a particular place and look at a pull sheet, choose your photograph and have it printed out. There we were wearing gloves, stockings, 3-inch high heels, some in platform soles, which is interesting to see back again now. Sydney was a city of trams. Trams went to all the suburbs. So it was an interesting place. And surprisingly, although sociologists see young men as having worn very, very dull clothes, and they're often seen as wearing black. But in the 1950s, the young men were quite colourful. They were wearing beiges, pale greens, blue, brown, navy blue and white pinstripe suits, coloured shirts. So the city was much more colourful than it is today.
What was the nightlife like?
Nightlife was interesting. We were free of the city as young people. None of us had cars, so we relied on public transport. We came in from all sorts of suburbs and met one another at Beverfield's Corner, which is now Woolworths at Town Hall Station. And from there we would go in the tram to various different places. One of our favourites was the Marrickville Town Hall, where we danced to Johnny O'Keefe.
You saw Johnny O'Keefe?
I saw Johnny O'Keefe. And Johnny O'Keefe was there on a Saturday night in a bright yellow suit, sometimes blue, a particular sky blue, Asia blue that he used to wear. So we danced to that. I saw Nat King Cole, Johnny Ray, all sorts of different people who, because we were just starting to get some of the international artists. The most of them came later.
Who was your favourite?
At the time, I was a great Nat King Cole fan, and he got a shocking reception in Sydney. Sydney treated Nat King Cole very, very badly.
Why was that?
It was a specific reporter, a journalist, who, when Nat King Cole came and sang, put a headline on the paper that he was a grinning black crocodile. Particularly lovely remark.
And how have times changed?
Sydney has majorly changed, I think, from having been a bastion of the white Australian policy to a very, very cosmopolitan city these days. We have representatives from about 156 different nations living in Australia these days, where at the time when I was young, there were some Indians, some Chinese, very, very few. You didn't see any Aboriginals in Sydney, so it was quite different.
Has the city changed for the better?
Yes and no. Everything changes for the better. From where I see in life, I don't want to be old-fashioned enough. It makes you old if you can only see good in the past and no good in the future. Sydney has a lot to offer now that it didn't have then, but Sydney was a beautiful place to come. I came from a country of 1.5 million people, and Sydney had 1.5 million people in it. So it still had the beauties of the beaches and the water and the lovely blue sky. I think the saddest thing about our cities these days is the pollution. The big loss in clean air.
Pollution plays a big role. If you could bring, say, any ideas from the 1950s today, what would you implement?
Well, I think majorly one of the things that I would bring in would be respect for one another. I think that's a sad loss to see in our society, and quite possibly that's to do with crowding, not necessarily anything else. But I do think people just were a little bit more respectful of one another and of the space.
What do you wish you'd known then that you know now?
Everything, I think. I'm glad I didn't know how the world was going to be. I'm really glad. Rather than, I think, what I wish I knew now, I'm glad I didn't know some things then. The world was much more innocent when I was young, and all of us are much more knowing these days.
Would you like to go back to the 1950s?
No, not really. It was interesting. I came from a generation of girls where we were the first lot of girls, no matter what kind of a family you came from, who all went out to work. Prior to the war, the girls who came from families where you had perhaps a managing director for a father or a small business didn't go to work. So I came from a generation of girls who all went to work. I think one of the things I'd like to share with people about the 50s is coming from an odd generation. There were the Georgians, the Victorians, the Edwardians and the Flappers. And if you ask anyone, if I ask you, you've heard of the Flappers?
Yes.
Who's the next generation who comes to mind?
Go on, tell me.
The baby boomers.
The baby boomers, interesting.
And I come from the generation that came between the Flappers and the baby boomers. And we are known to sociologists as the forgotten generation.
You are the forgotten generation.
We are classified as the forgotten generation. This is the group of people born in the Depression and through to the beginning of the baby boomers at the end of the Second World War.
Have you any regrets?
Anyone who's lived for as long as I have, William, and who has no regrets is a fool. I obviously have regrets. But no regrets that cripple my life.
What advice would you give to the young people of today growing up?
I think that the single biggest thing that people can do is to have respect, which I've mentioned before. Be respectful of yourself, be respectful of others, be respectful of the world around you. And I think respect covers everything that we might ever want to do. Good manners, protection of the environment. If you're respectful, you've got something really beautiful to have.
Anything you'd like to add?
What I'd like to add is what I think is the biggest change in the world since I was young. It was 6 weeks from New Zealand to Great Britain when I was a child. During the war, the word came across in cable. Pictures came 5 days later. And today, in your phone, you can see what's going on the other side of the world. The world has no dimension now. So in my lifetime, the other side of the world, which was 6 weeks away, is now in the palm of my hand.
Thanks very much, Suzanne, for talking to us.
Thank you, William.